All right, everyone, now it's time for the final poll analysis that we really need from South Carolina. We've got a couple new polls post-Nevada, and they show no statistical movement within the polling. If anything, Haley has absorbed some of the undecided voters in South Carolina, but things are so lopsidedly in Trump's favor that actually he could end up winning by more than the 25-point margin that I said was sort of the over and under that I gave before. It's looking like it might be closer to 30, actually, which is complete humiliation. Nikkihaley has no chance of winning in South Carolina. That's point number one. She has no chance of coming within single digits in her home state of South Carolina. That's point number two. Point number three, there's no longer anywhere near enough time for her to make up for the difference. Not even close. Even if she were to close the gap, she's been pumping ads into the state and campaigning there. And she's got the home field advantage, yet she can't crack 40. Not in a single poll. Donald Trump is riding up around 70 in some of these polls. I think that he won't quite clinch that, but he'll be in the 60s somewhere. Statistically speaking, he's got about a lead of between 20 and 30 points. I think it'll be at the upper end in the end. But then we have two new polls, again, post-Nevada, and a couple other aggregated polls that were post-New Hampshire, of course. And none of them show Nikkihaley with any real traction in the state. What a damning retribution against Nikkihaley from her former constituents, by the way, that they would give the state to an opponent when she literally was the governor there. It's not a good look. What's going to happen is that Donald Trump will win. He will win by more than 20 points, probably more than 25, and possibly above 30. He will humiliate Nikkihaley, and if it's at the upper end, she will drop out. If it's at the lower end of that, like let's say she comes in only 19 points behind, she'll say, well, good game. She might be nuts enough to stay in. Because part of her strategy, I think, is if I can just do well enough and justify staying in. Because they got the big corporate backers and stuff. They would rather waste hundreds of millions of dollars trying to stop Orange Man in a doomed charade than pump that money into a Trump campaign because they don't like him anyway. At the end of the day, they'd prefer Biden. So they're effectively just wasting money and time at this time trying to oppose Big Don. Because some of them doing it because they don't think he can win, others doing it because they don't want him to win. And so she's thinking in her head, well, if I just come close enough to be kind of sort of plausible, I can stay in long enough to get a few more delegates, and then if you've got a brokered convention, or Trump, because he is older, he dies, or he's incapacitated, that leaves me with the lion's share of the handful of delegates that weren't called for Trump, and then I can be nominee. That's her entire strategy, but if she loses by a large enough margin in South Carolina, the money will instantly dry up. Her campaign will have to be shaved down to a shell of its former self. She'll have to be flying coach, in other words. And she's not going to be able to justify continuing because the big money, at that point, they'll say, okay, now it's time to pivot to the general. They'll stop wasting money on Nikkihaley, their Hail Mary, quite literally, their last-ditch effort, and they'll pivot to giving money to Biden, or whatever Democrat it is, presumptively Biden. They will fund him. The Koch brothers are not going to fund Donald Trump. They might give him some money. Behind the scenes, they'll be giving money to op research and stuff like that. And to the Biden campaign, they'll do it through a PAC or something like that, launder the money through a shell agency or something. We've seen it before. These people don't want Donald Trump because they hate populism. They don't want you to expect higher wages. They want you to have to compete with third world illegal labor. They don't want you to be prosperous. They want to be prosperous. They don't want less. It's like when they rambled about equality back in the day. Why do you think that they transferred that out in favor of equity instead? Because equality would mean, hey, maybe the lower class should have a little bit more. Maybe the upper class should stop exploiting people so much. They don't want that. They want to keep that shit going. That grift is age-old and really, really lucrative for them. And neoliberals and neocons both do it. So don't get me started on the fact that George Soros and Mitch McConnell are basically the same person. Trump's going to crush her. There's not a question. Now, this race was over before it began. I effectively called the primary for Trump before Iowa even voted. Intelligent people understood that Trump was going to run the field. He crushes it in Iowa by double digits. He crushes it in New Hampshire by double digits. Nikkihaley, for some inane reason, decided to be on the unofficial primary in Nevada, lost to none of the above, only to see Trump win the caucus with 99% of the vote. He's running unopposed and always has been. Ron DeSantis never had a chance. Nikki Haley never had a chance. But she's staying in and he got out. He got out because he's politically pragmatic and he's not working for the deep state. And so he said, okay, this is clearly over. I'm not going to get it. I'm endorsing Donald. In a sort of lukewarm manner, but I'm giving him my endorsement because I understand at least he'll be nominee, if not necessarily win the presidency. Nikki Haley didn't get the memo. No sane pollster, analyst, staffer, confidant, or political consultant would be telling Nikki Haley to stay in the race. Every single one of them, if they're being honest, would say, you're done. You can't win. Now's the time to cut your losses, probably endorse Donald, or you can take your toys and go home. You can endorse Joe Biden, help put him over the edge. Do the Trump derangement syndrome shuffle or something like that. Make it a bipartisan issue, which could very well end up happening, by the way. She's no fan of populism herself. She's an anti-gunner, globalist, war hawk, and pretty much everything that Donald Trump tends to stand against. But there are people that are telling her to stay in, and that's partially because these people want to throw up that one last Hail Mary. And South Carolina's her home state, so like, okay, if we're going to do it, it's got to be now. You're not going to have another chance at it. Or they'll pivot to the general and start funding the Democratic Party machine. So Nikki Haley would be well warned to get out, but she doesn't have a reason to, because she's like, again, if I just come in a little closer than the polls anticipate, I can justify embezzling more money. I can continue to be a hindrance and siphon money away that would have been donated to the Trump campaign. She's a plant. She's a shill, effectively. She's also a war-hungry bitch. But she's got no chance. They're not going to stop Trump in the primaries. He's already sewn them up. He won with Iowa. Technically, he won before Iowa. When you looked at polling, unless you had a brain aneurysm like Joe Biden or something like that, there's no possible way you could construe any of the polling that you've seen throughout the entirety of the primaries as being anything but Trump is effectively going to get coronated. It was obvious. It was objectively going to happen. I had people for months who swore up and down, nope, the GOP is going to AstroTurf him out of the way in the primaries. Nope, actually, Ron DeSantis is going to be nominee. No, it's going to be Nikki Haley out of nowhere. She's got Nikki momentum. Mike Pence or something, Chris Christie can still do it. None of these things were ever physically possible. There was no statistical possibility. There was no, I'm like screwing up my eyes trying to figure out, is it 99% chance for Trump, or is it just fucking, stick a fork in it, it's done? It was always stick a fork in it, it's done. As soon as the final polling came in for Iowa, the game was over. It was over before the first vote was even cast. Apparently, Nikki Haley is too unintelligent to have gotten the memo, which means she's either batshit, like literally a lunatic. I use that term sometimes to describe situations in which people act abnormally or irrationally. In Haley's case, if she's really still serious about this, it's a literal delusion. Like a literal mental illness. There's something mentally wrong with her, and I'm not being figurative or hyperbolic when I say that, or it's for corrupt purposes. Embezzling the campaign cash, rolling over into a Senate run, or simply trying to stop Orange Man by being a money siphon. But she will lose. She's going to lose by a considerable margin in her own home state. That's never a good thing for a politician's career. That's about all. Peace out.